There is a secret, a quiet power that once you embrace it, you will never again waste your soul in anger toward another human being. I did not say you will never feel the sting of betrayal, the burn of disrespect, or the ache of disappointment. Oh yes, those things will come, but I promise you this: if you learn to do this one thing, you will never let anger master you. Never let it poison the well of your spirit. Never let it chain you to someone else's cruelty. There is a shift that takes place in the heart when you decide to see people not for what they did, not for what they said, but for who they truly are beneath the armor of anger, the clumsy mistakes, and the sharp edges of their flaws. To see someone through the lens of their humanity is to take your gaze beyond the insult, beyond the betrayal, beyond the wound, and to remember that they too were once a child with open hands and innocent eyes. It is to remind yourself that before they learn to be cruel, they learn to walk, to speak, to cry for comfort. And even now, hidden beneath the layers of what offends you, there is still a human being who is far more than the hurt they caused. When you carry anger, you magnify a single action or word until it consumes the whole image of that person. Suddenly they are nothing but the offense. You say to yourself, that liar, that betrayer, that enemy. And once you stamp that label on their forehead, you stop seeing anything else. But if you dare to shift your sight, if you remind yourself that this is still a living soul, broken and struggling as you are, then anger loosens its grip. The offense does not disappear, but it shrinks into perspective. It is no longer the whole truth of who they are. It is simply a chapter in their story, not the entirety of their existence. We often forget that humanity is messy. It is clumsy and contradictory. The same lips that can speak kindness can also spit venom. The same hands that can hold you tenderly can push you away. We are all capable of hurting and healing, often in the same breath. When you remember this about others, you also remember it about yourself. You think back to the times you have spoken without care, the times you have wounded someone else out of your own pain, the times you fell short of being the person you wanted to be. And if you can forgive yourself for being human, why not extend that same grace outward? Anger wants you to reduce people into villains. It thrives on black and white thinking. But humanity is never that simple. The person who betrayed you may have betrayed because they were afraid of losing. The one who insulted you may have done so because they felt small and needed to make themselves feel taller. The one who abandoned you may have been drowning themselves and had no strength left to carry you. This does not excuse them, but it does explain them. And when you start to look for explanation instead of condemnation, you stop feeding the fire of your anger. You shift from rage to understanding, and from understanding to peace. Think for a moment of a stranger who cuts you off in traffic. Your first instinct is to curse, to clench your jaw, to imagine they are selfish and reckless. But then imagine if you knew their story. Imagine they were rushing to a hospital, desperate to reach someone they love. Imagine they just lost their job and their mind is too heavy to focus. Suddenly, compassion slips into the space where anger once sat. You soften, not because their act was harmless, but because you saw their humanity behind it. You recognize that their behavior was born not only of carelessness, but of being human, flawed, pressured, hurting. This way of seeing does not come naturally. It must be chosen. You have to train your eyes to search past the offense and into the soul. You have to remind yourself that every person you meet carries burdens you cannot see, scars they never show, memories they wish they could erase. And sometimes their unhealed wounds bleed into you. But if you only see the blood on your hands, you miss the wound in theirs. When you take the longer look, the deeper gaze, you realize they are not the enemy. They are another fragile being stumbling through life just as you are. When you embrace this perspective, You begin to practice a quiet kind of mercy. You stop measuring people only by what they took from you, and you start recognizing what life may have already taken from them. You begin to notice that anger often hides fear, cruelty often hides pain, arrogance often hides insecurity. And with that recognition, your response changes. Instead of striking back, you breathe. Instead of condemning, you consider. Instead of storing the insult in your chest, you let it pass through, knowing it was never truly about you. It was about their battle, their wound, their weakness. To see through the lens of humanity also means to release yourself from the need to be judge and jury. You stop carrying the heavy responsibility of deciding who deserves punishment, who deserves your wrath. That is not your burden. Your only task is to live in peace, to preserve the sanctuary of your own spirit. And you do that by letting people remain human in your eyes, not monsters, not enemies, not demons, just human. For once you reduce them to less than human, anger feels justified, even righteous. But when you see them fully, in all their fragile imperfection, anger loses its fuel. You can acknowledge the wrong, you can set boundaries, you can walk away if needed, but you no longer burn with rage, you simply understand. This does not mean you allow yourself to be mistreated again and again. Seeing someone's humanity does not mean surrendering your dignity. What it does mean is that you refuse to let their brokenness break you. You choose to see clearly, respond wisely, and move forward lightly. You do not carry hatred like a stone in your chest. You lay it down, and in its place, you carry a softer vision, a vision that honors both your humanity and theirs. There is freedom in this practice. Imagine walking through life and no longer being pulled into endless cycles of anger, no longer being consumed by grudges, no longer replaying the words that once stung you. Imagine looking at those same people and instead of clenching your teeth, simply exhaling and thinking, "You are human just like me. You are learning just like me. You are flawed just like me." That recognition becomes your shield. It turns enemies into teachers, insults into lessons, and pain into compassion. Compassion is not the easy choice, and yet it is always the higher one. When someone offends you, your body knows the rhythm of reaction. The pulse quickens, the tongue sharpens, the hands grow restless to respond. Anger is quick. Compassion is patient. Anger wants to strike back. Compassion wants to understand. Anger makes you a mirror, reflecting the darkness aimed at you. Compassion makes you a lamp, shining light where shadows tried to gather. To choose compassion over reaction is to refuse to become what hurt you. Reaction is instinct. Compassion is mastery. Anyone can react. Anyone can spit fire when fire is thrown their way. That requires no strength, no wisdom, no growth. But to meet cruelty with calm, to stand steady when provoked, to speak gently when insulted, that is strength clothed in grace. That is the mark of someone who refuses to be moved by the winds of another's storm. Compassion is not weakness. Compassion is the sign that your soul is anchored, unshaken, unbroken by the turbulence of other people's behavior. You cannot control what others say to you, but you can control what you make of it. You cannot govern their actions, but you can govern your response. And your response is your power. It tells the world who you are, even more than their offense tells you who they are. If you allow yourself to react in kind, you become tethered to their level, dragged into their anger, reduced to their spirit. But when you choose compassion, you elevate. You refuse to live in the smallness of pettiness, and instead, you rise into the largeness of grace. Think of the moments when someone spoke to you harshly. Think of the sting of being misunderstood or the ache of being belittled. The instinct is to shout back, to defend your honor, to prove your worth in the heat of the argument. But have you noticed how hollow that victory feels? Even if your words strike harder, even if you silence them for a moment, what remains? A room heavy with tension, a heart heavy with regret. Compassion, however, leaves no such weight. Compassion allows you to walk away light because you did not pick up the burden they tried to hand you. You refused to take their poison into your bloodstream. Compassion is not about excusing bad behavior. It does not mean pretending the wound is not real. What it means is that you choose to see beyond the wound. You ask yourself, what pain lives in them that they would seek to give pain to me? What emptiness are they trying to fill by cutting me down? Compassion turns your gaze from the surface of the offense to the depths of the soul behind it. And more often than not, when you look deeply, you find fear, insecurity, shame, and sorrow. You realize their cruelty says less about you and more about the wars they are losing within themselves. When you choose compassion, you no longer give others the power to dictate your emotional climate. Their storm rages, but you remain the still water that does not stir. Their fire burns, but you do not add wood to it. Compassion is the refusal to be manipulated by anger. Reaction puts them in control. Compassion keeps you in control. And in that choice, you preserve your peace. Some people believe compassion is soft. But let me tell you, it takes far more courage to be kind when you are hurt than to be harsh in return. Compassion is not softness. It is steel wrapped in velvet. It is the strength to resist your first impulse and choose a better one. It is the ability to carry yourself with dignity when everything around you tries to strip you of it. Compassion requires discipline, and discipline is power. The one who can master their own response is always stronger than the one who can only provoke. There is wisdom in compassion, too. When you react in anger, you cannot see clearly. Your mind is fogged by the heat of the moment. But compassion clears the air. It allows you to step back, to see the situation with perspective. Reaction shouts, compassion listens. Reaction blames, compassion wonders. Reaction condemns, compassion seeks understanding. And in that understanding, you learn more about others and more about yourself. Imagine the person who insults you. They raise their voice, they hurl their words like stones. If you react, stones fly both ways, and soon both of you are bruised. But if you choose compassion, you lay your stones down. You refuse to throw them. And though they may stand there, fists clenched, ready for battle, the war ends because you did not join it. Compassion disarms anger. It confuses those who expect your retaliation. They cannot fight what does not fight back. And slowly, the flames they set begin to burn out on their own for lack of fuel. This is not about silence in the face of injustice. Compassion does not mean you accept abuse, nor does it mean you never speak up for yourself. Compassion simply changes the spirit in which you respond. Instead of reacting with venom, you answer with clarity. Instead of seeking revenge, you seek resolution. Instead of meeting hostility with hostility, you meet it with a calm strength that says, I know who I am, and nothing you say can take that away. Compassion allows you to set boundaries without bitterness, to speak truth without cruelty, to walk away without hatred. The world teaches us to fight fire with fire, but fire only multiplies fire. Compassion is water. It cools, it calms, it cleanses. When someone burns with anger toward you, try pouring water instead of more flame. Not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. You are too valuable to spend your nights replaying heated arguments, too precious to waste your energy matching the bitterness of another soul. Compassion says, I will not let you turn me into a version of yourself. I will remain who I am. Consider, too, what compassion does within you. When you react in anger, your body pays the price. Your chest tightens, your head throbs, your spirit grows weary. Reaction drains you, but compassion replenishes you. Compassion allows you to exhale, to release the heaviness of offense, to walk away free. You carry no grudge, no secret wish for revenge. You carry only wisdom gained and peace preserved. Compassion is not just for them, it is for you. It is the gift you give yourself when you refuse to be shackled by bitterness. And do not think compassion goes unnoticed. The world sees how you respond. Children watch, strangers observe, friends remember. Your example plants seeds. It shows others that there is another way to live, a way not bound by reactivity, but guided by grace. Compassion, multiplied across lives, has the power to soften even the hardest climates. The choice you make not to react harshly today may ripple outward and change more hearts than you will ever know. So when the offense comes, and it will come, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, will I react or will I choose compassion? And in that choice lies your freedom. Reaction is a chain. Compassion is wings. Reaction drags you down. Compassion lifts you higher. Compassion is not only what you give to others, it is what you give to yourself, dignity, peace, and strength that no insult, no betrayal, no cruelty can ever take away. There is a sacred moment between what happens to you and what you do in return. It is small, so small that most people miss it. It is as fleeting as the blink of an eye, as thin as a thread, and yet it holds the weight of your freedom. That moment is the pause. If you learn to master it, you will never again be a puppet pulled by the strings of anger, offense, or pride. You will become the author of your own response rather than a prisoner of your impulses. The pause is where your power lives. The world tempts you to believe that strength is in swiftness, that you must have an answer ready, a defense sharp, a reply strong enough to cut the air. But true strength does not live in the speed of reaction. True strength lives in the silence of restraint. It is not the one who speaks first who has the most authority. It is the one who waits, who breathes, who chooses with intention rather than instinct. In that pause, you are not rushed by someone else's fire. You are not pushed by someone else's storm. You stand still and steady, deciding who you will be in that instant. Reaction is quick, but wisdom is slow. Reaction leaps, but wisdom lingers. When you pause, you create room for wisdom to enter, for your higher self to catch up with your heated emotions. It is in the pause that you remind yourself of what matters most. Not proving your point, not winning an argument, not showing your strength in noise, but keeping your dignity intact and your peace preserved. The pause is where you ask yourself, if I answer now, will I regret it later? If I move now, will I dishonor myself? Think of all the regrets people carry, not because of what was done to them, but because of how they responded too quickly. Words thrown like daggers in the heat of the moment. Actions taken in anger that could never be undone. Relationships fractured because someone could not master a single breath of silence. One heartbeat of pause could have saved them from years of sorrow. That is the power of the pause. It prevents you from giving permanent power to temporary feelings. When you pause, you do more than stop yourself. You transform yourself. In that space, you break the chain of reaction that has enslaved generations. Perhaps your father reacted in anger. Perhaps your mother's tongue was sharp. Perhaps your community, your culture, your world has taught you to snap back, to defend at all costs, to fight fire with fire. But when you pause, you end that cycle. You choose not to pass down reaction as your inheritance. You choose to pass down calm, thoughtfulness, mastery. You declare, it ends with me. The pause is not weakness. It is discipline. It is not silence because you have no answer. It is silence because you have a better one. It is not hesitation born of fear. It is hesitation born of wisdom. The pause tells the world that you will not be rushed, not by anger, not by insult, not by fear of appearing weak. It says you know yourself well enough to take your time. It says you respect yourself too much to be pushed into becoming someone else's reflection. In that pause, you have choices. You can choose to breathe until your heartbeat slows. You can choose to listen instead of loading your next reply. You can choose to see the humanity of the person before you instead of the venom of their words. You can choose to walk away, to disengage, to save your energy for battles that are worth your spirit. Without the pause, choice disappears. You become nothing but reflex. With the pause, you reclaim choice, and with choice, you reclaim your life. Think of a great tree standing in the wind. The wind howls, it pushes, it bends the branches. The tree does not answer with rage. The tree pauses. It allows the wind to rush past. And when the storm has tired itself out, the tree remains standing. That is what it means to master the pause. You let storms come, but you do not fall. You let winds blow, but you do not break. You understand that storms exhaust themselves, but your silence strengthens you. The pause is also where compassion finds its entrance. Without pause, anger has already filled the room. Without pause, you have already armed yourself for battle. But with pause, compassion has time to whisper, "Look deeper. This insult is not about you. This cruelty is born from their pain." The pause opens your ears to wisdom you would not hear in the roar of your own voice. It opens your eyes to truths you would miss in the blur of quick reaction. Compassion needs room to breathe, and the pause provides that room. Even in the smallest moments of life, the pause changes everything. In traffic, when a car cuts you off, reaction wants to curse, to honk, to rage. But the pause says, perhaps they are rushing to someone in need. Perhaps this is not about me at all. In conversation, when someone dismisses you, reaction wants to defend, to demand to be seen. But the pause says, I know my worth whether or not they recognize it. In relationships, when someone wounds you with careless words, reaction wants to strike back. But the pause says, I will not let this wound define me or dictate me. The pause is the difference between escalation and resolution, between bitterness and understanding, between regret and peace. Wars, both personal and global, could have been prevented if someone had paused. Families could have remained intact if someone had paused. Friendships could have been saved. Lives could have been spared. Hearts could have healed, all because someone took a single breath before reacting. It is such a small thing, and yet it is everything. The pause is also where your truest self emerges. When anger rises, it is your wounded self that wants to speak. When fear rises, it is your insecure self that wants to speak. When pride rises, it is your fragile self that wants to speak. But when you pause, you give space for your strongest self to rise instead. The self that is calm, wise, unshaken. The self that knows who you are and does not need to prove it. That is the self that makes decisions worth remembering. Do not underestimate the pause because it feels quiet, because it feels small. The pause is not absence, it is presence. It is the moment when you step fully into yourself and refuse to be owned by anything outside of you. It is the moment when you claim your right to be deliberate, your right to be thoughtful, your right to decide who you are in the face of provocation. Others may want to steal that right from you by rushing you into a reaction. But when you pause, you hold that right close and you protect it. It takes practice, it takes failing and trying again. There will be times when anger will leap from your mouth before pause has a chance to settle in your chest. But keep practicing. Keep catching yourself sooner. Keep building the muscle of restraint. Over time, the pause will grow longer, stronger, more natural. What once felt impossible will become your instinct. Where others react without thinking, you will breathe without fear. There is an old saying, he who angers you conquers you. But when you pause, no one conquers you. They may provoke, but they cannot control. They may insult, but they cannot define. They may try to light your fire, but you choose whether to burn. The pause is where you win, not over them, but over yourself, and that victory is the greatest of all. Anger feels powerful when it first arrives. It rushes into the body like a storm, fills the chest with fire, makes the voice sharp, the hands restless, the mind ready to strike. In that first surge, anger convinces you that it is energy, that it is strength, that it will give you the fuel you need to win. But that is the great deception. Anger is not your energy. It is borrowed energy, and it will always demand a price greater than what it gives. Think about it. Each time you let anger rise and stay, your body pays. The heart beats faster, the muscles tighten, the breath grows shallow, the nights grow restless. You may believe you are punishing the one who hurt you, but the truth is that anger spends your resources while they keep theirs untouched. The person who offended you often sleeps soundly while you toss and turn. They may have forgotten the words they threw like stones, yet you rehearse them in your mind over and over until they carve wounds deeper than their voice ever could. You lend them your peace, your clarity, your health. That is the cost of borrowed energy. Every time you hold anger, you carry a weight that was never meant to be yours. Their action was the spark, but it is your choice to keep feeding the flame. Anger feeds on your strength, but gives you nothing lasting in return. It burns hot, but it leaves only ashes. You cannot build a life out of ashes. You cannot nurture joy or grow peace in soil scorched by rage. To understand anger as borrowed energy is to understand that you are paying a debt that was never yours. Their insult, their betrayal, their slight, it was their weakness, their burden. Yet when you clutch anger close, you take that weakness into your own heart and you carry it as though it belongs to you. Why carry what is not yours? Why drain yourself for a debt they created? Anger convinces you that it is a weapon, but really it is a leash. It ties you to the one who wronged you. You may believe you are standing tall against them, but in truth, you are bound to them, carrying them inside your mind, inside your chest, every hour of the day. You give them space in your life they do not deserve. You give them control over your emotions, your health, your joy. That is the bitter trick of borrowed energy. It costs you everything while it frees them of responsibility. Imagine for a moment that someone you know insults you. The words sting and anger surges. If you allow it to stay, you replay their words in your mind. You argue with them in your imagination. You craft the perfect comeback, one you will never say aloud. Hours pass, and still you are carrying them. They are not even in the room, yet you are hosting them in your spirit. That is borrowed energy. They struck once, but you keep striking yourself with the echo of their words. The more you hold on to anger, the more it transforms into bitterness. And bitterness is even costlier. It corrodes the vessel that holds it. It seeps into your relationships, into your laughter, into your very body. You may believe you are keeping bitterness aimed at them, but it spreads inside you, dulling your joy, weakening your spirit, dimming your light. You thought you were holding it against them, but in truth, you have been holding it against yourself. What would happen if you chose not to borrow that energy? What would happen if, when anger first knocked at your door, you refused to let it in, refused to let it drain you? You would still feel the hurt, yes. You would still know the sting, but you would not chain yourself to it. You would not let it dictate the rhythm of your day, the condition of your body, the quality of your sleep. You would acknowledge the wound without carrying the fire. That is not weakness, that is wisdom. That is protecting what belongs to you, your energy, your peace, your freedom. We often confuse anger with passion, but they are not the same. Passion builds, anger destroys. Passion fuels creation, art, justice, and love. Anger burns everything it touches, including the one who carries it. Passion invests energy with a return. Anger spends energy with a loss. To live in passion is to live alive. To live in anger is to live exhausted. One enriches you, the other empties you. Release comes with the realization that anger is never free. Each time you give into it, you are writing a check your spirit must cash. Your mind, your health, your relationships, these are the accounts from which payment is withdrawn. Over time, the debt compounds. Sleepless nights, fractured connections, stress that turns to illness, words you wish you could swallow back. These are the debts anger demands you pay. And for what? For the satisfaction of clinging to a fire that never warmed you, only burned you. You may ask, but if I let go of anger, am I not letting them go unpunished? The truth is, punishment is not your responsibility. Life has its own way of balancing accounts. You need not become judge and executioner. What matters most is not whether they receive their due. It is whether you protect your spirit from ruin. By refusing to borrow the energy of anger, you are not excusing them. You are excusing yourself from carrying their burden. You are saying, this belongs to you, not me. I will not let your weakness poison my strength. Imagine your life as a vessel filled with pure water. Each time you hold anger, you pour ink into that water. At first, it is only a drop, but the more anger you carry, the darker the water becomes, until what once was clear and refreshing is now murky and bitter. Yet if you refuse to carry their offense as your own, you protect the clarity of your water. You keep your vessel pure, not because others never tried to poison it, but because you never allowed their poison to stay. Anger always promises victory. It whispers, if you hold me, you will win. If you lash back, you will feel powerful. But the truth is that victory bought with anger is hollow. It may silence your enemy for a moment, but it chains you to their level. It may make you feel fierce for an hour, but it leaves you weary for days. The only true victory is peace. The only true strength is the ability to walk away unburdened. And you cannot reach peace if you are carrying anger as borrowed energy. There is such beauty in release. To release anger is not to deny what happened, but to deny it the right to steal from you again and again. It is to say, you took something from me in that moment, but I will not allow you to keep taking from me now. You may have broken my trust, but you will not break my spirit. You may have caused me pain, but you will not own my energy. That is the declaration of someone who understands the difference between hurt and imprisonment. You may be hurt, but you refuse to be imprisoned. The next time anger rises in you, pause and ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Is this worth my health, my peace, my joy? And if the answer is no, let it go. Return that energy to its source. Do not spend what is not yours. Do not pay debts that do not belong to you. Protect your spirit from the drain of anger and keep your energy for what matters, for love, for growth, for creation, for joy. Forgiveness is one of the most misunderstood acts of the human heart. People imagine that to forgive is to excuse, to say what you did was fine, to let the offender walk away without consequence. But forgiveness is not approval. Forgiveness is release. It is not about setting them free. It is about setting yourself free. It is the art of unshackling your spirit from chains that only grow heavier the longer you carry them. When someone wounds you, they create a moment in time that cannot be undone. A word said, a trust broken, a promise betrayed, these things cannot be erased. They live in memory, carved deep, but what happens after is no longer in their hands, it is in yours. You can hold the wound tightly, cradle it like a treasure, polish it until it gleams with bitterness. You can let it dictate the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you love, or you can decide that you will not give the offense more power than it already had. You can decide that you will not live imprisoned by the moment they created. That decision is forgiveness. Forgiveness is not about saying their act was small. No, it is often because their act was great that forgiveness is needed at all. Forgiveness does not shrink the offense, it shrinks its hold on you. It says, you did harm, but that harm will not keep echoing in my life forever. I will not rehearse it every day. I will not allow it to poison my future. In forgiving, you take the weight that sat heavy on your chest and lay it down, not because it was never heavy, but because you refuse to keep carrying it. There is strength in holding on, but there is greater strength in letting go. Holding on is easy. It requires no new thought, no new courage. You simply let the wound replay itself endlessly in your mind. But letting go demands vision. It demands the courage to imagine a future not dictated by pain. Forgiveness is the proof that you believe your life is worth more than your bitterness, that your peace is worth more than your pride. So many people stay trapped because they mistake forgiveness for weakness. They say, if I forgive, they will think they won. If I forgive, they will think it was acceptable. But forgiveness is not weakness, it is power. It is power because it shifts the story from their act to your choice. It declares that you are not their victim, you are your own liberator. It is not about whether they feel victory, it is about whether you feel peace. And peace is always the greater prize. Do not confuse forgiveness with reconciliation. Forgiveness does not always mean returning to the relationship, does not always mean trusting again, does not always mean standing close to those who wounded you. Forgiveness simply means the wound no longer governs your spirit. You can forgive and still create distance. You can forgive and still set boundaries. You can forgive and still say, I will not let you near enough to harm me again. Forgiveness does not bind you to the offender, it frees you from them. Forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself. It is the act of unclenching your fists and realizing you were holding poison all along. When you forgive, the poison spills out and your hands are open again to receive joy, to receive love, to receive peace. You cannot carry both bitterness and blessing in the same hands. One will always push the other out. Forgiveness makes space for the life you deserve rather than the pain you inherited. Think of the times you have held anger towards someone. Days, months, even years pass, and still the thought of them makes your chest tighten. Perhaps they have long forgotten the moment. Perhaps they have gone on with their life. Yet you are still bound. You are still carrying them, still tethered to the harm. That is the cruel truth of unforgiveness. It binds you to the very thing you long to escape. Forgiveness is the key that unlocks that tether. It says, I release you, and in doing so, I release myself. Some wounds are deep, and forgiveness does not come in an instant. Sometimes it comes in layers, like peeling back grief one page at a time. You forgive today, and tomorrow you find the anger has crept back in. You forgive again and again until the grip loosens. Forgiveness is not a single act, but a practice, a way of refusing, day after day, to let bitterness claim your heart. Each time you forgive, the burden grows lighter. Each time you forgive, your spirit grows stronger. There is healing in forgiveness too, not because it erases the past, but because it changes your relationship with it. The wound may remain in memory, but it no longer bleeds. It becomes a scar, and scars do not hurt the way wounds do. Scars remind you that you lived, that you endured, that you overcame. Forgiveness turns the raw wound into a scar of wisdom, and that wisdom guides you into gentler, freer living. You may wonder, why should I forgive someone who never apologized, who never changed, who never cared? The answer is simple, because forgiveness was never for them. Forgiveness is for you. Whether or not they feel remorse, whether or not they ever see their fault, Whether or not they ever speak your name again, you still deserve to live free. You still deserve nights of rest, mornings of peace, days unburdened by replaying pain. To withhold forgiveness until they repent is to give them control over your healing. And you cannot afford to place your healing in the hands of the one who wounded you. Forgiveness does not rewrite history, but it writes a new ending. It says, yes, this happened. Yes, it hurt. But no, it will not define me. No, it will not own me. No, it will not steal my joy any longer. It transforms your story from tragedy to triumph, from victimhood to victory. You may not be able to change what was done, but you can always change what comes next. And forgiveness is the doorway to that change. So when you find yourself holding on to hurt, remember this. You are not protecting yourself by keeping anger alive. You are protecting yourself by letting it go. You are not dishonoring your pain when you forgive. You are honoring your future. Forgiveness is not approval, it is release. And in that release, you reclaim your power, your dignity, your freedom. You walk forward lighter, stronger, unbound. Gratitude is not simply the polite act of saying thank you. It is not the quick nod we give to life when something goes our way. Gratitude is deeper, fuller, a way of seeing the world that transforms the way you live in it. To train your heart for gratitude is to retrain your entire life. It is to shift your gaze from what is missing to what is present, from what has been taken to what still remains, from what you expected to what you have been given. There is a discipline to gratitude. It does not always arrive naturally. Life is filled with disruptions, losses, and disappointments that clamor louder than blessings. It is easy to notice the storm, the delay, the wound. It is not always easy to notice the breath in your lungs, the sunrise at your window, the kindness of a stranger's smile. Gratitude requires practice, not because blessings are rare, but because our attention is often fixed on the wrong things. Training your heart for gratitude is teaching yourself to notice what has always been there but was overlooked. When you carry gratitude, anger has no room to grow. Anger thrives in emptiness, in the space between what we wanted and what we received. But gratitude fills that space. It reminds you that though the gift may not look like what you dreamed, it is still a gift. It whispers, this moment is enough. This breath is enough. This life, even with its imperfections, is still a treasure. And in that whisper, anger begins to lose its grip. To live with gratitude is to wake each day asking not, what do I lack, but what do I hold? It is to look at your hands and instead of seeing what has slipped away, notice what remains. You may not have everything you desired, but you have something. You may not be surrounded by everyone you wanted, but you are not alone. Gratitude opens your eyes to abundance where scarcity once reigned. It shifts your inner conversation from complaint to celebration. Some imagine gratitude as a passive posture, a way of settling for less. But gratitude is not passive. Gratitude is powerful. It is the refusal to let bitterness narrate your story. It is the bold act of saying, I choose to celebrate what is here instead of cursing what is absent. That is not weakness. That is strength. It takes courage to live in gratitude when the world tempts you with comparison, when culture pushes you to crave more, when pain invites you to linger in loss. Gratitude is rebellion against despair. There are days when gratitude feels far away, days when grief is heavy, when anger burns hot, when loss is too close to your chest. Gratitude does not deny those days. It does not pretend that sorrow isn't real. It does not demand that you paste a smile over pain. Gratitude lives alongside sorrow, not in its absence. It says, yes, this hurts, but even here, something remains that I can be thankful for. A small kindness, a memory of joy, a moment of beauty that glimmers through the cracks. Gratitude is not about erasing the shadows, but about finding the light that breaks through them. You can train your heart for gratitude the way you train a muscle, through repetition, through discipline, through practice. Begin with small things. Whisper thanks for the meal before you. Whisper thanks for the friend who called your name. Whisper thanks for the quiet of the night or the laughter of a child. The more you practice, the more your eyes begin to see. Gratitude grows like a flame fed by each new spark of noticing. What began as effort becomes instinct. What began as discipline becomes delight. Anger will come knocking, but gratitude stands guard. Anger may say, "You deserved more." Gratitude replies, "And yet I already have much." Anger may say, "Look what they did to you." Gratitude answers, "Look what life still gives me." Gratitude is not blindness. It does not pretend wrongs do not exist, but it refuses to let wrongs become the whole story. It insists that goodness, however small, is still here. The heart trained in gratitude sees differently. It sees blessings where others see burdens. It sees opportunity where others see lack. It sees lessons where others see only failures. Gratitude changes not only what you notice, but how you carry yourself. It lightens your step, softens your voice, and steadies your spirit. It is hard to live bitterly when your heart is counting blessings. And gratitude is contagious. When you live with gratitude, others around you feel it. They see in you a peace that is not dependent on perfect circumstances. They hear in your words a music that is not drowned out by complaint. Gratitude invites others into joy. It teaches without preaching, showing that a heart turned toward thankfulness creates a life turned toward peace. Think of those who live with gratitude even in hard places. The elder who gives thanks, though their body grows frail. The worker who smiles, though the day is long. The parent who blesses the table, though the cupboard is not full. Their gratitude does not come from excess, it comes from choice. And that choice carries them further than anger ever could. To train your heart for gratitude is to train yourself for freedom. It frees you from the endless chase of more. It frees you from resentment at what others have. It frees you from the prison of if only. Gratitude does not wait for the perfect life. It lives fully in the imperfect one. It turns what you have into enough and enough into abundance. Life will never be without its trials, without its injustices, without its pains. But gratitude ensures that life will never be without joy either. For joy is not found in the absence of pain. It is found in the presence of thankfulness. Gratitude is the soil where joy takes root, even in the rockiest ground. It is the anchor that steadies you when storms arise. When you train your heart for gratitude, you are training yourself to see the miracle in the ordinary, the breath you take without effort, the sky that opens each morning, the chance to love and be loved, to speak and be heard, to rise and begin again. These are the treasures life scatters freely, waiting for eyes willing to notice. And when you notice, when you give thanks, when you live in gratitude, anger loses its dominion. You cannot be enslaved by rage when your spirit is awake to blessing. Gratitude is not just something you feel, it is something you live. It is the choice you make every day to see, to notice, to honor, to give thanks. And in that choice, your life becomes lighter, richer, freer. Gratitude is not a reaction to a perfect life. Gratitude is the reason life, in all its imperfection, feels perfect enough. There comes a point in every life when anger invites you to fight on its terms. It says, stand against them, prove yourself, strike back. Anger is persuasive because it dresses itself as strength. It tells you that resistance is power, that retaliation is victory. Yet history and experience remind us that true power is not found in fighting against, but in rising above.